Today's Monday morning monologue is brought to you by the Modern Gun School. This is not the other place that thinks that they can take your entire GI Bill and run with it. This is an accredited online university. Whether you just want to learn a few things or you actually want to break into the firearms space, they leave you with options. Check them out at Modern Gun School. Let's get into the video. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kurt Hallstrom. I'm your host as always. You're watching the VSO Gun Channel, and today we are going to be divisive. So you guys have seen it. It's everywhere. It is saturating the internet.
It's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
I am going to say that from the onset of this conflict, I have been a very agnostic person. I am not on the pro-Ukraine side. I am not on the pro-Russian side. I think that both of these countries are horrible places that need completely reformed. I don't think that my money should be wasted on this conflict. That is my position. And I understand that that's a very isolationist position, but I also understand the arguments that people that find themselves on either side of the conflict can make, and some of the logic on both sides actually makes sense. So what I wanted to do today is kind of wade into, I guess there's a Second Amendment implication here that I think some people will call it hypocrisy, because the left side of the American aisle is typically associated with disarmament, anti-gun, sovereignty of the citizen and all that sort of stuff. They're very anti that. Well, in this instance, they are literally the warmongers, very pro-arming Ukraine. And I thoroughly understand why that is. A lot of people will call it hypocrisy. No, I think it's right on message, because you have to understand that the left believes in the power of the state. The government will protect you. And when you look at how the Ukraine situation developed, when Ukraine broke away from Russia, they just inherently had a bunch of heavy weapons, nuclear weapons, some other heavy stuff. And basically, Europe and the United States went to Ukraine and said, hey, you don't need those. We'll write you a check. You give us the nukes and some of the heavier weapons, and Europe and NATO and the United States are going to protect you. So when you line that up with the left side of the aisle, saying that you don't need guns, the government can protect you. You can't fight other governments anyway. You don't have nukes and F-15s and all that sort of stuff. When you line those arguments up and put them into that overall arching structure of reliance on the government, this is an instance of governments of the world saying, we'll help you. You don't need to arm yourself. Give us your stuff. And then if you ever have a problem, we'll come help you. This is that promise of government coming due. And if that doesn't go off, then that is a default of their religion, which is the Church of Government. Ukraine really took this kind of very European in its perspective, because not only did it get rid of its heavy weapons, but it also disarmed its citizens. So the citizenry was not there to be able to provide a check against their own government, which is highly corrupt and run by a bunch of oligarchs, and also against foreign powers. And you say, oh, well, back to the whole Joe Biden F-15s and nuclear weapons and submarines and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, if that was the case, then why the heck did the Ukrainian government start handing out small arms to the citizens when the invasion occurred? You see, the logic breaks there. Now, I think at this point in time, I've fully exposed my biases. The first is the Second Amendment angle. For lack of a better way to put it succinctly, the Ukrainians let their Mandalorian culture fall away. Their warrior culture, their weapons culture was allowed to go very European. So they disarmed their citizens. They did not provide for their own defense. And basically for shorthand, they left their ass hanging out and it got clapped. My perspective is, well, you did it to yourself, deal with it yourself. And the second part of my position is stop wasting my fucking money on something that is not clearly not going to resolve itself through military armed conflict, right? Both sides are very committed. The powers involved are not going to budge militarily because there are just certain lines that are going to cross. You've got NATO on one side. It's become a NATO versus Russia conflict again, and both sides got nukes, okay? So it's just a bad situation all around. And I think that much of the political right in the United States finds themselves in that middle category. A lot of people will say, well, if you're not pro-Ukraine, then you're pro-Russia, and that is not it. We don't like Russia at all. We have not liked Russia for a long time. I mean, God, I hate to do this, but do you remember Sarah Palin? I'm not going to show you the clip. It's really bad.
They're our next door neighbors.
I was always going to show you the clip. You knew that I was going to show you the clip. That's how we do here. But there are some elements of what we would typically associate with the American right that do line up on the Ukrainian side. And to, again, succinctly define this, I would say the military. And the military and sub-military apparatus in the United States is very anti-Russia. And to, again, quickly define this, you've got people who have been told their entire careers and their entire lives in many instances that Russia is this huge boogeyman. He's out there in the East, and they're pulling the levers and doing the things. And for the most part, there is some truth to the fact that Russia supplies many bad things across the world. With arms. Like, they have a military and an oil economy. Those are the two things that they do. Oil and natural gas together. Fossil fuel economy and military economy. Those are the two pillars of the Russian economy. And I understand that having an opportunity to dismantle your primary foe that you have been working against your entire lives is a fantastic opportunity. And they have been successful in destroying and dismantling a huge swath of the Russian military. You can see it to the point where Russia literally has to import North Korean conscripts. It's not going well for them. And I understand also the data applications, because every single time the Ukrainians fire a javelin or fire a surface-to-air missile or any other munition like that, that data comes back to us, and it also allows us to clear the warehouses of the outdated munitions and get new and updated ones. Like, I understand this aspect of it, but you have to ask yourself, what is the end goal of the United States and the United States military in this proxy conflict? Is it definitive victory and return of all lands to Ukraine? Well, that is not going to happen, okay? No matter how you slice it, that is not going to happen. So that's not a realistic goal. Is it to contain Russia? I mean, maybe, but if you look at the last several decades of U.S. projection of power into the world, because we no longer have this imperialist ideal, which I think should change. I think that if we go into a place that and our soldiers bleed on it and we spend our money on it, that we should own it. That's a discussion for another day. We no longer do the imperial thing. We are interested and invested in regime change. And the ultimate goal of the United States projecting itself into this conflict is to force a regime change in Russia. Don't believe me? Look at every single person out there that talks about this conflict on a semi-regular. That is what they talk about. Do I think that Vladimir Putin has overstayed his welcome in the government? I think that he is an authoritarian dictator and all of the bad things associated with it. When I look at this situation, it is clear that there is not a military resolution to this. Russia is too powerful. NATO is too powerful. Unless there is direct action by NATO, which will trigger a third world war that is a nuclear world war, unless we're going there, then there needs to be some other solution. And that is why I find myself sort of in the Trump-Vance camp here, and I say, hey, that was actually a halfway decent exchange. I do believe that the Ukrainians expected to walk in there and get another blank check to continue this war, and he didn't get it. He also wanted some kind of assurance, and I understand why he wanted some kind of a security assurance, because the last time he was here and doing that, it was with Obama, and that didn't work out so good at all, did it? The underlying conflict, which is really adversity between NATO and Russia. Russia has seen the constant gobbling up of former Soviet states that further and further push the NATO borders closer to Russia. That is a fact. So when we look at this and you look at Vladimir Putin's position, he has to continue the war, because when the war ends under the current system, Russian economy collapses because they currently can only sell their fossil fuel products to bad actors around the world, and they can only sell their weapons to bad actors around the world. The only choices they have are to continue their military economy in this war, or Vladimir Putin finds himself in a very bad situation. So the only other resolution here is that there has to be an opening for the Russian economy besides those two options, because otherwise it isn't going to happen. And I only see one way to do that, and a lot of you aren't going to like it. Russia returns Crimea to Ukraine. Russia gets to keep the eastern provinces that they took. And the citizens that live there, if they're not feeling like being Russian, then they can move back to Ukraine. Both countries are inducted into NATO, and Ukraine gets their nuclear weapons back. We have to get over this Russia is the bad guy thing. And the reason I say that is because it is fully revealed that Russia is a paper tiger. We've pulled the curtain back, and there's not a whole lot of substance there. Why are we continuing to focus on this bad guy? Because, to be honest, that is not the next adversary that we are going to face. We are, and should be, very concerned about China. And I'm going to use a video game reference here for you to close up shop today. Those of you who follow all of my stuff, you'll know that I'm a big Warhammer fan, specifically fantasy, but I also like 40K. My game of choice is Total War Warhammer 3. There are a group of factions that have the ability to seduce units for the duration of a battle. You basically buy them off, and they come over and fight the battle on your side. If you can turn the number one agent of our real adversary in the future, which is going to be China, their number one agent is Russia. If you can turn Russia to our side, China will be forced to go it alone. And that very well may delay the precipitating events that will ultimately result in that war. It might delay that 50 years. That is in the best interest of everyone in the world, and especially the United States. And I rest my case. Also, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, fuck Russia and fuck Ukraine.